Picture this moment. Harry Potter sits on that wooden stool, the sorting hat perched upon his head, and he hears those whispered words that changed everything in the original story. Not Gryffindor, but Slytherin. The hat saw it, you know. It saw that Harry would do well in Slytherin, that he had the ambition, the cunning, the resourcefulness. But what if Harry hadn't argued? What if he'd simply accepted the hat's first choice? Today we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating alternate timelines in the wizarding world. What if Harry Potter, the boy who lived, had been sorted into Slytherin House? Let's start at the very beginning, that crucial moment when everything could have gone differently. The sorting hat sits on Harry's head, and it speaks to him about his qualities. In the original timeline, Harry desperately thinks, not Slytherin, not Slytherin, influenced by his brief friendship with Ron Weasley and the stories he'd heard about dark wizards coming from that house. But in our alternate timeline, Harry doesn't panic. Maybe he's more curious than afraid. Maybe Ron's comment on the train didn't stick with him as strongly. Maybe, just maybe, Harry thinks about what the hat said about greatness and ambition, and he doesn't resist. The hat calls out, "Slytherin," and the great hall falls into a stunned silence. You could hear a pin drop. The Slytherin table erupts in confused applause, not quite sure how to react to having Harry Potter, the most famous wizard in their world, suddenly sitting among them. Draco Malfoy's face would be absolutely priceless in this moment. This is the same boy who tried to befriend Harry on the train, only to be rejected. Now Harry's walking toward his table, toward a seat that might be right next to Draco himself. Dumbledore's expression remains calm, but those who know him well might catch a flicker of concern behind his half-moon spectacles. This isn't what he expected. This isn't what he planned. Harry Potter in Slytherin House throws a wrench into so many carefully laid plans. But Dumbledore is nothing if not adaptable, and he watches carefully as Harry takes his seat at the Serpent's table. Severus Snape's reaction is perhaps the most complex of all. Here sits the son of James Potter, the boy who looks so much like his father that it causes Snape physical pain to see him, but now he's wearing green and silver. Now he's in Snape's own house, the house Snape is supposed to protect and favor. The conflict on Snape's face would be visible for just a moment before his typical mask of cold indifference slides back into place. This changes everything for Snape. He can't openly despise a member of his own house, not without raising serious questions about his impartiality. Let's talk about those first few days and weeks at Hogwarts, because this is where Harry's entire experience shifts dramatically. In Gryffindor, Harry had the warm, welcoming atmosphere, the immediate friendship with Ron and Hermione, the sense of belonging to something brave and noble. In Slytherin, things are more complicated, more nuanced, and frankly, more political. The Slytherin common room is located in the dungeons, beneath the Black Lake. It's a space of green-tinted light filtering through the water, of leather sofas and dark wood paneling, of whispered conversations and careful alliances. Harry enters this world as both a celebrity and an unknown quantity. Everyone knows his name, knows his story, but nobody quite knows what to make of him. Draco Malfoy would likely make another attempt at friendship, and this time Harry might be more receptive. Without Ron's immediate friendship coloring his perceptions, Harry might see Draco differently. Not as a spoiled bully, but as a lonely boy, trying to live up to impossible expectations from his father. Draco's offer of friendship on the train was genuine in its way. He truly believed he was helping Harry by offering to guide him toward the right sort of people. In Slytherin, Harry might come to understand the intense pressure Draco is under, and that understanding could foster an unlikely friendship. But it wouldn't be simple. Draco would still make disparaging comments about Muggleborns, about blood purity, about all the toxic ideology he learned from Lucius. Harry, raised by Muggles himself, would push back. Their friendship would be contentious, full of arguments and debates. But here's the interesting thing about Slytherin House. They value ambition and cunning, yes, but they also value loyalty to their own. Once Harry is part of the house, he's family. And Slytherins protect their own, even when they disagree. Harry's roommates would include Draco, of course, but also Theodore Nott, Blaise Zabini, and possibly Crabbe and Goyle. Theodore Nott is an interesting character, often overlooked in the original story. He's intelligent, observant, and comes from a Death Eater family, but he's also quite solitary. Harry and Theo might find common ground in their shared experience of loss. Theo's mother died when he was young, and Harry never knew his parents. There's understanding that could develop there, a quiet friendship based on mutual respect rather than loud declarations of loyalty. Blaise Zabini is another fascinating possibility. He's described as handsome, somewhat vain, and very private. His mother has been married 7 times, with each husband dying under mysterious circumstances and leaving her their fortune. Blaise would be someone who teaches Harry about the more subtle aspects of wizarding society, about reading between the lines, about understanding what people aren't saying. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. What about Ron and Hermione? In the original timeline, these two became Harry's best friends, his chosen family, the people he couldn't imagine life without. In our Slytherin timeline, everything changes from the very first night. Ron Weasley, sorted into Gryffindor as expected, would view Harry's sorting with confusion and possibly betrayal. Remember, Ron was Harry's first real friend in the wizarding world. They shared a compartment on the train. Ron shared his limited knowledge about magic and Hogwarts, and they bonded over their shared nervousness about the sorting. When Harry ends up in Slytherin, the house Ron had just told him was the source of most dark wizards. It would feel like a rejection. The friendship between Harry and Ron in this timeline would be stunted before it ever really began. They might remain cordial, might nod at each other in the corridors, but that deep brotherly bond would never form. The divide between houses at Hogwarts is significant, and Gryffindor and Slytherin have the most intense rivalry of all. Ron, influenced by his brother's stories and his family's history, would struggle to reconcile the Harry he met on the train with the Harry wearing Slytherin green. Hermione Granger presents a different challenge. As a Muggle-born student, Hermione faces prejudice in the original timeline, but she has the protection of Gryffindor House and Harry's friendship. In this alternate reality, Hermione would be sorted into Gryffindor or possibly Ravenclaw, and she'd be navigating Hogwarts without Harry's immediate support. The troll incident in the bathroom might play out very differently. Actually, let's explore that crucial Halloween encounter with the troll, because it's one of the defining moments of first-year friendship in the original story. In canon, Harry and Ron save Hermione from the troll, cementing their trio. But in our Slytherin timeline, would Harry even be there? The answer might surprise you. Harry, even in Slytherin, is still Harry. He's still the boy who runs toward danger when someone needs help, who can't stand by when someone is in trouble. When Quirrell announces the troll is in the dungeons and tells everyone to return to their dormitories, Harry might hear whispers that Hermione Granger is missing, that she's been crying in the bathroom all day after Weasley made a cruel comment, and Harry, perhaps with Draco or Blaise or Theo in tow, might still go looking for her. Imagine that scene playing out with Harry in Slytherin robes. Hermione, terrified, cornered by a mountain troll, and then Harry bursts through the door. But he's not alone. Maybe Draco is with him, complaining the whole way about why they're risking their necks for a Muggle-born. Maybe it's Theodore Nott, quiet and efficient, already thinking through strategies. The troll is defeated through Slytherin cunning rather than Gryffindor bravery. Maybe they use misdirection, distraction, manipulation of the environment. Hermione is saved, but the dynamic is entirely different. This incident could be a turning point for Draco Malfoy. Seeing Hermione's fear, watching her nearly die, and then participating in her rescue might crack the foundation of his blood purity beliefs. It's one thing to parrot your father's rhetoric about mudbloods and blood status. It's another thing entirely to watch a girl your age nearly die and realize she bleeds red, just like you do. This could be the beginning of Draco's redemption, happening years earlier than in the original timeline. Hermione, saved by Slytherins, might develop a more nuanced view of the house. She'd still be friends with Ron, probably, but she'd also have a connection to Harry and whoever helped save her. This creates an interesting cross-house dynamic that might help bridge some of the intense rivalry between Gryffindor and Slytherin. Let's move forward to the mystery of the Philosopher's Stone. In the original story, Harry, Ron, and Hermione uncover Snape's apparent plot to steal the stone, and they go after it themselves to prevent him. In our alternate timeline, everything about this mystery shifts. First, Harry's relationship with Snape is fundamentally different. Snape can't openly bully a member of his own house without facing consequences from the other Slytherins and their parents. Slytherin House operates on a principle of internal loyalty. You can have your conflicts within the house, but you present a united front to outsiders. Snape might still harbor deep resentment toward Harry, but he has to mask it better, be more subtle in his dislike. This means Harry might not immediately suspect Snape of trying to steal the stone. In fact, Harry might approach Snape directly with his concerns about Quirrell, who would still be acting suspiciously. Imagine that conversation. Harry, nervous but determined, staying after potions class to speak with his head of house. Snape, torn between his lingering hatred of James Potter and his duty to protect a Slytherin student, forced to actually listen. Snape is not a stupid man. He's brilliant, actually, and he's been suspicious of Quirrell all year. If Harry comes to him with evidence, with observations about Quirrell's behavior, Snape might actually investigate properly. This could lead to Quirrell being exposed much earlier, before he ever makes his attempt on the stone, or it could lead to Snape being more directly involved in protecting Harry, which would be absolutely fascinating given their complicated relationship. But let's say the confrontation still happens in some form. Harry still ends up facing Quirrell and Voldemort beneath the school. The difference is who goes with him. In the original, it's Ron and Hermione, his Gryffindor friends. In this timeline, it might be Draco, Theo, or Blaise. Imagine Draco Malfoy coming face to face with Lord Voldemort, the dark wizard his father served, and realizing the true horror of what his family was involved in. That kind of revelation at age 11 would be traumatic but potentially transformative. Harry still has the protection from his mother's sacrifice. He still defeats Quirrell. Voldemort's spirit still flees. But the aftermath is different. Slytherin House would rally around Harry, protecting one of their own who defeated a dark wizard threatening the school. Draco would be forced to reconcile the propaganda he heard at home with the reality he witnessed. And Snape, saving Harry's life yet again, would have to confront his own conflicted feelings about the boy. Moving into second year, and this is where things get really interesting. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened, Muggleborns are being attacked, and the whole school is whispering about the heir of Slytherin. In the original timeline, Harry is suspected despite being in Gryffindor. In our alternate timeline, Harry is in Slytherin House, he can speak Parseltongue, and he looks nothing like the Muggleborn students being targeted. The suspicion on him would be intense. Draco, if he's friends with Harry, might not make as many cruel comments about the attacks. Or he might, parroting his father's views, leading to serious conflict between him and Harry. This could be a breaking point in their friendship. Or it could be the moment Draco truly starts to question everything he's been taught. When Harry first speaks Parseltongue during the dueling club, the reaction would be even more dramatic. Slytherin speaking Parseltongue is less unusual historically, but combined with Harry's fame and the attacks happening, it would cause panic. The other Slytherins might view Harry with a mixture of awe and fear. Some might think he really is the heir of Slytherin. Others might try to use him for their own purposes. Harry's investigation into the chamber would be different. He wouldn't have Hermione's brilliant research skills as readily available, though they might still work together despite being in different houses. But Harry would have access to Slytherin knowledge, to family histories and old stories that Gryffindors wouldn't know. Theodore Nott, whose family is old and traditional, might know legends about the chamber that prove useful. The discovery that Ginny Weasley is being possessed by Tom Riddle's diary creates a complicated situation. Harry saves her, of course, because that's who Harry is. But the fact that a Slytherin saved Ron's sister from the heir of Slytherin would send ripples through the school. It would challenge everyone's preconceptions about what it means to be in Slytherin House. Harry's conversation with Tom Riddle in the chamber would be fascinating. Riddle might try a different approach with Harry in Slytherin robes. He might appeal to house loyalty, to the greatness they could achieve together, to Harry's obvious ambition and power. The temptation might be stronger, but Harry's core goodness, his fundamental decency, would still win out. He still destroys the diary, still saves Ginny, still kills the basilisk. Third year brings Sirius Black into Harry's life, and this relationship would be crucial in Harry's development. Sirius, a Black family member who rejected Slytherin values and chose Gryffindor, would have complicated feelings about Harry being in Slytherin. When they finally meet and Sirius learns the truth about Peter Pettigrew, they'd have to navigate this unexpected dynamic. Sirius might initially be disappointed or concerned that Harry is in Slytherin. He ran away from his family partly because of what Slytherin House represented to them. But as he gets to know Harry, he'd realize that house doesn't define character. Harry in Slytherin, still kind, still brave, still willing to risk everything for the people he cares about, would prove to Sirius that his godson is nothing like the worst of the Black family. This could lead to fascinating conversations between Harry and Sirius about house identity, about family legacy, about choosing who you want to be, regardless of where the sorting hat places you. Sirius could help Harry understand that being in Slytherin doesn't mean accepting their darkest traditions. Harry could help Sirius move past his own prejudices about his former house. Remus Lupin's revelation as a werewolf might play out similarly, but Harry's Slytherin cunning might mean he figures it out earlier. Slytherins are observant, they notice patterns, they value knowledge that gives them an advantage. Harry might piece together Lupin's secret and confront him directly, leading to an earlier conversation about lycanthropy, prejudice, and acceptance. Peter Pettigrew's capture is crucial. If Sirius isn't sent back to Azkaban, if the truth about who betrayed the Potters comes out, it changes the entire trajectory of the war. Harry would have his godfather, a connection to his parents, someone who could provide stability and family. Sirius, cleared of all charges, would be able to openly support Harry through the trials ahead. Fourth year and the Triwizard Tournament present unique challenges for Slytherin Harry. When his name comes out of the Goblet of Fire, the reaction would be split. Some Slytherins would immediately assume Harry cheated and found a clever way to enter despite the age line, viewing it as ambitious and cunning. Others might be suspicious or resentful of the attention he draws. But Slytherin House would likely rally behind him once he's officially a champion, because having a house member in the tournament reflects well on all of them. Draco's jealousy might manifest differently. Instead of the Potter Stinks badges, he might be torn between resentment at Harry's fame and pride that a Slytherin is competing. This internal conflict could make Draco more sympathetic, more three-dimensional. He might even reluctantly help Harry prepare for tasks, knowing that Harry's success is Slytherin's success. The Yule Ball would be interesting. Harry might ask Daphne Greengrass or another Slytherin girl, or he might still pursue Cho Chang, creating a cross-house romance that defies the usual boundaries. The political implications of Harry Potter's date choice would be discussed extensively in the Slytherin Common Room. The tournament tasks would showcase Harry's Slytherin qualities. The cunning required to figure out the egg's clue, the strategic thinking needed for the maze, the ambition driving him forward despite the danger. Harry's natural bravery would still be present, but it would be framed differently, understood through a Slytherin lens. And then Cedric Diggory dies, and Harry returns with Voldemort's resurrection. This moment is crucial regardless of house affiliation. Harry has witnessed murder, been tortured, fought for his life. The trauma is the same, but the aftermath would be different. The Slytherin students would be particularly conflicted. Many of their parents were Death Eaters or Death Eater sympathizers. Voldemort's return means their families are about to be drawn back into a war they thought was over. Some might be excited, believers in pure-blood supremacy who view Voldemort's return as a good thing. Others would be terrified, knowing what's coming, understanding the cost. Harry's position in Slytherin during Voldemort's second rise creates a fascinating dynamic. He's the boy who thwarted Voldemort as a baby, who has defeated him multiple times since. But he's in the house that traditionally produces the most Death Eaters. Harry becomes a symbol of resistance from within, proof that Slytherin doesn't automatically mean Dark Wizard. Fifth year brings Dolores Umbridge, and her tyranny would affect Harry regardless of house. The DA would still form, but it might have more cross-house participation from the start. Slytherins who oppose Voldemort and realize they need to learn to defend themselves might join earlier. Draco's choice would be particularly interesting. Does he join the DA, defying his father? Or does he report it to Umbridge, earning the Inquisitorial Squad privileges? Let's imagine Draco chooses to join the DA. It would be secret, of course. He couldn't let his father find out. But Draco has seen enough by now to know that Voldemort's return is real and terrifying. He's seen Harry face death repeatedly. He's begun to question the blood purity rhetoric. So maybe, just maybe, Draco shows up to the Hogshead meeting. Maybe he's one of the Slytherins who signs the parchment, who swears to learn defense against the dark arts. The Room of Requirement becomes a sanctuary for all houses united against tyranny. Harry, teaching defense to his peers, demonstrates that leadership isn't about your house colors. It's about courage, knowledge, and the willingness to stand up for what's right. Slytherins learning from Harry Potter would have seemed impossible a few years ago, but here they are, practicing stunning spells and shield charms side by side with Gryffindors and Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws. Snape's occlumency lessons with Harry might be less antagonistic if Harry is in Slytherin. Snape still struggles with seeing James Potter in Harry's face, but his duty to his house might make him actually try to teach properly. Harry, approaching the lessons with Slytherin cunning, might think strategically about what he shows Snape, what he holds back. The lessons might actually succeed in teaching Harry to protect his mind. But let's say Voldemort still lures Harry to the Department of Mysteries with the false vision of Sirius being tortured. Harry still goes, still brings friends, still fights Death Eaters in the prophecy room. The key difference is which friends come with him. Instead of the DA members from Gryffindor, maybe it's a mixed group including Slytherins. Maybe Draco is there facing Death Eaters who know his father. Maybe Theodore Nott is there stunning masked figures who might be relatives. The prophecy is still revealed. Harry learns that either he or Voldemort must die, that he's the chosen one, that this was always his destiny. That burden is crushing regardless of house. But Harry has different support systems in this timeline. His Slytherin friends, dealing with their own complicated family situations and the return of Voldemort, might understand Harry's isolation in unique ways. Sirius still might die at the Department of Mysteries, and that loss would devastate Harry. But the grief, the rage, the desire for revenge, these would be understood and even encouraged by Slytherin values in their darkest form. Harry would have to consciously choose not to give in to that darkness, not to let revenge consume him. It's a test of his character, and one he would pass, but the temptation would be ever present. Sixth year is when everything accelerates toward the final confrontation. Draco is given the impossible task of killing Dumbledore, and in the original timeline, Harry is his antagonist throughout the year. But in our Slytherin timeline, Harry might be one of the few people who notices how much Draco is struggling. Living in the same dormitory, seeing him late at night, Harry would observe the weight crushing his friend. Harry might confront Draco earlier, might piece together what's happening and try to help. This could lead to Draco confessing about the vanishing cabinet, about the Death Eaters planning to invade Hogwarts, about the task Voldemort gave him. With Harry's intervention and support, Draco might choose differently. He might go to Dumbledore or Snape before the Death Eaters arrive. He might find the courage to refuse Voldemort's task. But let's say events still lead to that tower, that moment when Draco has Dumbledore at wand point and can't bring himself to kill. Harry, hiding under the invisibility cloak, witnesses everything. Snape still kills Dumbledore, still fulfills his unbreakable vow to protect Draco. But Harry's understanding of why might be different with the context of house loyalty, of Snape protecting a Slytherin student at any cost. The revelation about the Horcruxes remains the same. Dumbledore still tells Harry about Voldemort splitting his soul, about the 6 objects that need to be destroyed. Harry still understands that defeating Voldemort requires finding and destroying pieces of soul hidden around Britain and beyond. But the knowledge of his Slytherin friends' complicated family situations might actually help. Theodore Nott might know about family artifacts. Draco has been inside Malfoy Manor and knows its secrets. 7th year is when everything comes to a head. Harry, Ron, and Hermione still leave school to hunt Horcruxes, but in this timeline, Ron might not be part of the trio. It might be Harry, Hermione, and perhaps Draco or Theodore Nott. Or Harry and Hermione might work alone, with allies providing information and support from within Slytherin families. The break-in at Gringotts to get Hufflepuff's cup would still happen. The infiltration of the Ministry to get Slytherin's locket would still be necessary. These events play out similarly because they're about Harry's mission, not his house affiliation. But Harry's Slytherin cunning would serve him well in the planning and execution of these heists. The return to Hogwarts for the final Horcrux is where house loyalty really matters. Harry needs to get into Ravenclaw Tower to find the lost diadem, but he also needs his former housemates to rally to the cause. Many Slytherin students would be conflicted, their parents fighting for Voldemort, their house historically aligned with pure blood values. But Harry Potter is one of them. He's a Slytherin who stood against tyranny, who proved that ambition and cunning can serve the light. When Voldemort gives his ultimatum, demanding Harry surrender himself or watch the school be destroyed, Some Slytherins might waver, but others would stand firm. Draco, if he's been on Harry's side, might be one of the voices urging the house to fight. Theodore Nott might use his influence. Even Pansy. Parkinson's call to seize Harry and hand him over might be shouted down by housemates who have come to respect and care for him over 7 years. The Battle of Hogwarts rages with mixed house participation. Slytherins fighting alongside Gryffindors, protecting the school they all call home. Families are torn apart as children fight against parents, as the younger generation rejects the blood purity ideology they were raised with. It's messy and tragic and brutal, but it's also a turning point for Slytherin House's reputation. Harry still walks into the Forbidden Forest. He still uses the Resurrection Stone to call forth his parents, Sirius and Remus. He still faces Voldemort and allows himself to be struck by the killing curse. The sacrifice is the same, the love protection extending to everyone fighting for Hogwarts. Harry's house doesn't change his fundamental willingness to die for others. The revelation that Harry is a Horcrux, that part of Voldemort's soul has lived inside him all these years, explains so much about the Sorting Hats debate. Harry had Slytherin qualities partly because he had a piece of Voldemort's soul. But he chose what to do with those qualities. He used his cunning and ambition for good, for protecting people, for building a better world. When Harry reveals himself to be alive, when he faces Voldemort in the Great Hall for the final time, students from all houses watch. The final duel between Harry Potter and Tom Riddle is the culmination of everything. 2 orphans, 2 Parselmouths, 2 wizards connected by prophecy and blood, fighting for the future of the wizarding world. And when Harry's Expelliarmus counters Voldemort's killing curse, when the Elder Wand flies through the air into Harry's hand, when Voldemort collapses into mortality and death, it's a Slytherin who defeated the darkest wizard of all time. The aftermath of the war would be fascinating in this timeline. Harry Potter, a Slytherin hero, would help rehabilitate the house's reputation. He'd be proof that Slytherin doesn't equal evil, that ambition can serve good purposes, that cunning and resourcefulness are valuable traits when used ethically. The trials of Death Eaters would still happen, but Harry might be more vocal in defending those who changed sides, who fought in the final battle despite their family's loyalties. Draco Malfoy, if he fought with Harry, might avoid Azkaban entirely. His testimony about what it was like living under Voldemort's occupation of his home, about the horrors he witnessed, would be powerful. Harry's testimony on Draco's behalf would carry enormous weight. The friendship between Harry, Potter, and Draco Malfoy would be seen as symbolic of the healing that needs to happen in wizarding society. The changes Harry might advocate for in the wizarding world would be interesting. In the original timeline, Harry becomes an Auror and largely works within the existing system. But Slytherin Harry, with his understanding of how power structures work and how to manipulate them, might push for more fundamental reforms. He might challenge the house system itself, arguing for less division between students. He might work to remove the stigma attached to Slytherin House and the unfair advantages given to Gryffindor. Harry's relationship with his own children would be different too. In the original timeline, we see him reassuring Albus Severus that it doesn't matter if he's sorted into Slytherin. But imagine Harry being able to tell his son that he himself was in Slytherin, that some of his closest friends were Slytherins, that the house produced heroes as well as villains. That reassurance would carry so much more weight, be so much more meaningful. The legacy of Harry Potter and Slytherin would reshape how the house is perceived for generations. Young witches and wizards sorted into Slytherin wouldn't have to carry the burden of being automatically suspected of dark intentions. They could point to Harry Potter and say, "He was one of us, and he saved the world." The house could reclaim its values of ambition, cunning, and resourcefulness without the association with blood purity and dark magic. Think about what this means for wizarding society as a whole. The rigid house divisions that cause so much conflict, the prejudices that fuel wars, the assumptions that lead to injustice, all of these could begin to break down with Harry as a living example of why house stereotypes are harmful. Slytherin could produce the next great Aurors, the next innovative potion masters, the next cunning strategists who protect rather than terrorize. The relationship between Harry and Snape deserves special attention in this timeline. In the original story, Harry names his son after Snape, acknowledging him as the bravest man he ever knew. But imagine if Harry had been Snape's student in Slytherin House. Imagine 7 years of complicated interactions, of Snape struggling with his duty to protect Harry while hating what Harry represents. The revelation of Snape's true loyalty, his love for Lily, his role as a double agent. All of this would hit differently if Harry had been Snape's responsibility as head of house. Harry might understand Snape better, seeing the man behind the harsh exterior, because he would have had more opportunity to observe him. Snape, forced to interact with Harry more regularly, might have let small moments of care slip through his defenses. The relationship would still be fraught and difficult, but there might be more understanding on both sides. When Harry learns the truth about Snape, when he sees those memories in the pensive, the grief might be even more profound because of their complicated history. The broader theme of this alternate timeline is about choice versus destiny. The Sorting Hat told Harry he would do well in Slytherin, and Harry chose otherwise in the original story. But what if he'd accepted that sorting? Would he still be the same person fundamentally? The answer is yes and no. Harry's core values, his love for his friends, his inability to stand by when someone needs help, his willingness to sacrifice himself for others, these traits would remain regardless of house. But his approach to problems, his understanding of power and politics, his relationships and alliances, these would all be different. Slytherin Harry would prove that houses are less about destiny and more about the environment in which your natural traits develop. Harry's bravery doesn't disappear in Slytherin. It just manifests differently, tempered by cunning and strategic thinking. His loyalty is still fierce, but it's expressed through the complex web of alliances and house politics. His ambition, often overlooked in the original story, would be more visible in Slytherin, driving him to excel and prove himself. The impact on the other characters cannot be overstated. Ron Weasley without Harry as his best friend might develop differently, less overshadowed by fame, but also less motivated to be brave. Hermione Granger without the support of the Golden Trio might face more discrimination, but also might develop even stronger independence. Neville Longbottom might step into a leadership role in Gryffindor earlier, becoming the hero he was always meant to be without Harry in the house. Draco Malfoy's entire arc would be transformed. Instead of being Harry's enemy, he could be his friend, rival, and eventual ally. The chance to choose differently from his father, to be shown an alternative path, could save Draco from years of guilt and trauma. The friendship between Harry and Draco could be one of the most powerful symbols of change in the wizarding world. The question of whether Harry would ultimately defeat Voldemort remains crucial. And the answer is yes, but the path would be different. Harry's victory in the original timeline relied on love, sacrifice, and the support of friends who stood by him. In the Slytherin timeline, those elements are still present, but expressed differently. Harry might use more cunning in tracking down Horcruxes, more political savvy in building alliances, more strategic thinking in planning the final confrontation. But when it comes down to it, when he's facing Voldemort in that final moment, it's still about the choice to fight for life, for love, for a future where people are free. The Slytherin Common Room would have been Harry's home for 7 years, the place where he studied, laughed, cried, and grew up. The green and silver would be his colors, worn with pride despite the stigma. He would have learned to navigate the complicated social hierarchy of Slytherin House, making alliances, earning respect, proving himself not through Gryffindor bravery alone, but through Slytherin cunning as well. The dungeons beneath the lake would hold memories just as precious as Gryffindor Tower ever could have. Imagine Harry's Patronus, that beautiful stag that represents his father, bursting forth in the Slytherin Common Room. Imagine the silver light reflecting off the lake waters outside the windows, illuminating the green-tinted space. That image captures the essence of Slytherin Harry. He is his father's son, brave and true, but shaped by different circumstances, different friendships, different challenges. The professors at Hogwarts would have to adjust their perceptions of Harry in this timeline. McGonagall, who favored Harry in the original story partly because he reminded her of his parents and because he was in her house, would have to appreciate him from a distance. She would still recognize his talent, his character, his heroism, but without the house connection creating that extra bond. Her pride in Harry's achievements would be more objective, less personal, but no less real. Flitwick would probably delight in having Harry in classes regardless of house. The charms professor seems above house prejudices, more interested in magical talent and dedication. Sprout, the Hufflepuff head, might be more neutral toward Harry than in the original timeline, where his Gryffindor status put him in natural opposition to her house in Quidditch and house points. But it's the relationship with Dumbledore that would face the most significant shift. Dumbledore, who manipulated events and people with the greater good in mind, had certain expectations about Harry. He needed Harry to be willing to sacrifice himself when the time came, to walk into death with open eyes. A Harry raised in Gryffindor, surrounded by stories of brave sacrifice and noble death, might be easier to guide toward that fate. But Slytherin Harry, taught to value self-preservation and cunning survival, might ask more questions, might resist the manipulation more effectively. Dumbledore would have to approach Harry differently, be more strategic in how he revealed information, more careful in how he guided Harry toward his destiny. The conversation about the prophecy, about the Horcruxes, about what must ultimately happen, would require Dumbledore to appeal to Harry's Slytherin values. Not just this is brave, but this is smart. This is the only way to truly defeat Voldemort. This is how you protect everyone you care about. Harry's understanding of power would be more sophisticated in this timeline. Slytherin House teaches you that power matters, that knowing how to acquire and wield power is important. Harry would see more clearly how the ministry works, how pureblood families maintain influence, how money and status and connections shape the wizarding world. This knowledge could make him more cynical, or it could make him more effective at changing things. Consider Harry's approach to the Elder Wand. In the original story, Harry rejects the Deathly Hallows temptation, choosing to repair his own wand and return the Elder Wand to Dumbledore's tomb. Slytherin Harry might be more tempted to keep the most powerful wand in existence. The ambition, the understanding of how such power could be used for good, the recognition that in the wrong hands it could be disastrous, all of these would war within him. Ultimately, Harry would still make the right choice because that's who he is at his core. But the internal struggle would be more pronounced. The Deathly Hallows themselves present an interesting test of Slytherin values. The Elder Wand represents power and conquest. The Resurrection Stone represents the refusal to accept loss, the desire to cheat death. The Invisibility Cloak represents protection and cunning concealment. A Slytherin might be drawn to all three for different reasons. But Harry, even in Slytherin, would recognize that the Hallows represent dangerous obsessions, that true mastery of death comes from accepting it, not fearing it or trying to control it. Harry's career after the war would be fascinating to explore. In the original timeline, he becomes an Auror, hunting dark wizards and working within the system. Slytherin Harry might still choose that path, but he might also consider other options. With his understanding of power structures and his cunning mind, Harry could excel in politics, working within the ministry to reform laws and dismantle discriminatory systems. He could become an advocate for house unity, for equal treatment of magical creatures, for removing the stigma from werewolves and other marginalized groups. Or Harry might choose a completely different path. He could become a teacher at Hogwarts, using his position to reshape how students understand house divisions and blood purity. Professor Potter, teaching defense against the dark arts, could influence generations of young witches and wizards, showing them that a Slytherin hero is not an oxymoron, that the values of all houses can work together to create something beautiful. The romantic relationships in Harry's life would shift in this timeline. Cho Chang might still catch his eye, but the dynamics would be different with Harry and Slytherin. The cross-house romance would have different social implications. Ginny Weasley, who he ultimately marries in the original timeline, might be less likely to pursue a relationship with a Slytherin, especially given her family's history and prejudices. But then again, Ginny is fierce and independent, and if she fell for Harry, house colors wouldn't stop her. There's also the possibility of Harry ending up with a Slytherin girl. Daphne Greengrass is often popular in alternate universe stories, portrayed as intelligent and independent. Pansy Parkinson, if she went through character development similar to Draco, could become someone Harry respects. Astoria Greengrass, who Draco marries in the original timeline, might be someone Harry gets to know through Slytherin social circles. But perhaps the most interesting romantic possibility is that Harry's understanding of relationships would be more complex coming from Slytherin. He would see how pureblood families arrange marriages for political advantage, how relationships are used to build alliances, how love is sometimes secondary to strategy. This would make Harry more cautious about romance, more aware of people's motivations, but also more appreciative when he finds genuine connection and affection. The question of blood purity and how Harry confronts it from within Slytherin House is central to this alternate timeline. In the original story, Harry is firmly opposed to blood purity ideology from the outside. He's friends with Hermione. He sees the harm these beliefs cause. He stands against them clearly. In Slytherin, Harry would be confronting these beliefs from the inside, hearing them from friends and housemates, seeing how they're taught and reinforced. Harry's arguments against blood purity would be more nuanced and potentially more effective coming from within Slytherin. He couldn't simply dismiss the beliefs as evil from a safe distance. He would have to engage with the reasoning, flawed as it is, and dismantle it piece by piece. He could point out that Voldemort himself was a half-blood, that blood purity is based on lies and fear, that the greatest witches and wizards come from all backgrounds. Hermione would be crucial in these arguments. Her brilliance, her magical power despite being Muggle-born, would be undeniable evidence against blood purity ideology. If Harry maintained friendship with Hermione across house lines, if she became someone the Slytherins got to know and respect through Harry, it could slowly change minds. Not everyone, certainly not the true believers, but the students who are simply repeating what they heard at home without really thinking about it. The tragedy is that some of Harry's housemates would still become Death Eaters or Death Eater sympathizers. Some would be too indoctrinated, too committed to their family's beliefs, too afraid of standing against Voldemort. Harry would have to watch people he lived with for 7 years, people he shared meals and studied with and maybe even called friends, choose the wrong side. That betrayal would cut deeper perhaps than in the original timeline, because these were his housemates, his own. But others would be saved. Students who might have drifted toward the Death Eaters in the original timeline might be pulled back by Harry's influence, by his friendship, by his example. Every person Harry saves from that path is a victory, a life not ruined by Voldemort's poison, and those saved individuals would go on to influence their own families, their own children, creating ripples of change that extend far beyond the war itself. The Battle of Hogwarts would be remembered differently in this timeline. Instead of being primarily a Gryffindor triumph, it would be seen as a moment when all houses united against darkness. The image of Slytherins fighting alongside Gryffindors, of house rivalry set aside in the face of existential threat, would become legendary. Songs would be written about it, stories told to children, history books dedicated to analyzing how old hatreds were overcome. Harry Potter himself would become a symbol of unity, the boy who bridged the divide between houses, who proved that your sorting doesn't determine your destiny. The phrase Slytherin's hero would enter common parlance, used to describe anyone who rises above prejudice and expectation to do what's right. Harry would probably hate the title, uncomfortable with fame as always, but he couldn't deny the impact he had. The changes to Hogwarts itself in the aftermath of the war might be more dramatic with Harry as a Slytherin alumni. He might push for reforms to the house system, advocating for more inter-house cooperation, less emphasis on competition, more focus on unity. The House Cup might be reformed or even eliminated. Common rooms might be redesigned to encourage interaction between houses. The goal would be to prevent future generations from growing up with the same divisions that fueled so much conflict. Some would resist these changes, arguing that house traditions are important, that rivalry builds character, that competition drives excellence. Harry would have to use all his Slytherin cunning to navigate these political battles, building coalitions, making compromises, slowly pushing the school toward a better future. It would be exhausting and frustrating, but Harry would persist because he knows the cost of division. Has seen where house prejudice leads. The relationship between Harry and the Black family legacy deserves exploration. Through Sirius, Harry inherits not just money and property, but also a complicated family history. The Blacks were a Slytherin family, proud of their pureblood status, producers of multiple dark wizards and Death Eaters. But they also produced Sirius, who rejected all of that and chose differently. And they produced Andromeda Tonks, who married a Muggle-born and was disowned for it. Harry and Slytherin might feel more connected to this legacy, understanding the weight of family expectation and the courage required to defy it. He might restore Grimmauld Place not as a reminder of what the Blacks were, but as a symbol of what they could become. He could turn it into a place of learning and healing, Somewhere people could come to understand that bloodlines don't determine character, that every family has the potential for both darkness and light. Creature, the Black family house elf, would be an interesting character in this scenario. In the original timeline, Harry eventually treats Creature with respect and kindness, earning the elf's loyalty. In the Slytherin timeline, Harry's understanding of power dynamics and manipulation might make him approach Creature differently from the start. He would recognize that cruelty breeds resentment, that loyalty must be earned, that even a house elf deserves dignity. The portrait of Walburga Black at Grimmauld Place would have complicated feelings about Harry. On one hand, he's in Slytherin, the proper house for a black heir. On the other hand, he stands against everything she believed in, friends with muggles and muggleborns, rejecting blood purity. The portrait's rantings would take on a different character, confused and frustrated by this Slytherin who refuses to be what a Slytherin should be in her eyes. Harry's relationship with his own fame would be affected by his house placement. In Gryffindor, fame was uncomfortable, but at least made sense within the narrative of the brave hero. In Slytherin, fame would be more complicated, viewed through a lens of ambition and self-promotion. People might assume Harry cultivates his celebrity, uses it for advantage, wants the attention. Harry would have to work harder to convince people that he genuinely hates being famous, that he never wanted any of this. The Daily Prophet's coverage of Harry might be more critical if he's in Slytherin. Rita Skeeter's attacks during the Triwizard Tournament could lean into house stereotypes, painting Harry as ambitious and power-hungry, willing to do anything for glory. The smear campaign in 5th year would be vicious, using his Slytherin status as evidence that he can't be trusted. Harry would face an uphill battle for public opinion, having to overcome not just lies about his mental state, but also prejudice about his house. But this would make his eventual vindication more powerful. When the truth about Voldemort's return becomes undeniable, when Harry is proven right about everything, the people who doubted him based on house prejudice would have to confront their biases. It would be a teachable moment for the entire wizarding world, a collective reckoning with how stereotypes blind people to truth. Harry's approach to leadership would reflect Slytherin values. Instead of the inspiring speeches and bold frontal assaults associated with Gryffindor leadership, Harry might favor careful planning, strategic positioning, using information as a weapon. He would understand that sometimes the best way to win is to make your enemies underestimate you, to appear weaker than you are, to strike when they least expect it. This is actually closer to how Harry operates in the original story than many people realize. Harry is often strategic, willing to break rules and use deception when necessary. His rescue of Sirius involves time travel and manipulation of events. His investigation of Draco in 6th year involves stealth and surveillance. His Horcrux hunt requires cunning and careful planning. Harry has always had Slytherin traits. Being sorted into that house would simply make them more visible and acceptable. The moment when Harry uses the Resurrection Stone in the Forbidden Forest would be particularly poignant in this timeline. His parents appear, along with Sirius and Remus, and they see him in Slytherin robes. James Potter, a Gryffindor through and through, sees his son wearing green and silver. But there's no disappointment, no judgment, only love and pride. Because James can see what Harry has become, how he's used his Slytherin qualities for good, how he's about to make the ultimate sacrifice. Lily Potter would perhaps understand even better. She was friends with Severus Snape, a Slytherin, before their falling out. She knew that house doesn't define character, that good people can come from anywhere. Seeing Harry in Slytherin wouldn't surprise her the way it might surprise James. She would simply be proud of the man her son has become. Regardless of his house colors, Sirius, despite his own prejudices against Slytherin, would have already come to terms with Harry's sorting. In this timeline, they've had years to discuss it, to work through Sirius's complicated feelings about his family's house. Sirius appearing in the forest would be a moment of pure support. His earlier reservations long since overcome by love and respect for his godson. Remus Lupin, always the most diplomatic and understanding of the Marauders, would have accepted Harry's Slytherin status from the start. Remus knows about prejudice, about being judged for things beyond your control. He would see the parallel between bias against werewolves and bias against Slytherins. His appearance in the forest would be gentle and encouraging, reminding Harry that courage takes many forms. The walk through the forest to his death would be Harry's most Slytherin moment and his most Gryffindor moment simultaneously. It's cunning because Harry understands this is the only way to truly defeat Voldemort, that his sacrifice will protect everyone else. It's strategic thinking, sacrificing a piece to win the game. But it's also incredibly brave, requiring Harry to face death with open eyes, to not flinch or run or try to save himself. The merging of Slytherin and Gryffindor qualities in that moment would be beautiful and profound. When Harry wakes up in the forest, having survived Voldemort's killing curse once again, he has a choice to make. He can reveal himself immediately or wait for the right moment. In the original story, Harry chooses to wait, pretending to be dead while being carried back to the castle. This is actually a very Slytherin move, using deception and patience to gain advantage. Harry in this timeline would make the same choice, but it would be seen as more in character. Less surprising given his house training. The confrontation with Voldemort in the Great Hall, with all the fighters watching, would be Harry's moment to represent what Slytherin can be at its best. He doesn't gloat or boast. He offers Voldemort one last chance at remorse, trying to save him even now. When Voldemort refuses and attacks, Harry's defense is elegant and perfect. The Elder Wand recognizes its true master, the killing curse rebounds, and Tom Riddle dies by his own curse. The silence that follows Voldemort's death would be broken by cheers from all houses, but the Slytherins would be the loudest. One of their own defeated the Dark Lord. One of their own saved the wizarding world. The vindication would be overwhelming. 7 years of being suspected and judged finally ended in the most dramatic way possible. Slytherin House would finally be able to hold its head high without shame or suspicion. The immediate aftermath of the battle would see Harry surrounded by people from all houses, all wanting to thank him, touch him, share in the victory. But Harry would be exhausted, traumatized, mourning the dead. He would want nothing more than to find somewhere quiet and process everything that happened. His Slytherin friends would understand this need, would help shield him from the crowds, would create space for him to grieve and heal. The funerals for those who fell in the battle would be heartbreaking. Fred Weasley, Remus Lupin, Nymphadora Tonks, Colin Creevey, and so many others dead because of Voldemort's quest for immortality and power. Harry would feel the weight of every death, would wonder if things could have been different, if he could have saved more people. His friends would have to remind him that he saved the entire wizarding world, that without him, everyone would have died or lived under Voldemort's tyranny. The rebuilding of Hogwarts would be both literal and metaphorical. The castle itself needs repairs, walls to be reconstructed, windows to be replaced, damage from the battle to be fixed. But the real rebuilding is in the relationships between houses, in the trust that was broken and must be restored, in the forgiveness that must be extended to those who made mistakes, but ultimately chose the right side. Harry would be instrumental in this rebuilding, using his influence to advocate for unity and healing. He would speak at memorials, write articles for the Prophet, meet with ministry officials, all in service of creating a better wizarding world. His Slytherin cunning would serve him well in these political battles, helping him navigate complex social dynamics and build coalitions for change. The Malfoy trials would be a crucial test of Harry's character and influence. Lucius Malfoy is clearly guilty of multiple crimes, but Narcissa saved Harry's life by lying to Voldemort in the forest. Draco, if he fought with Harry in this timeline, would deserve leniency despite his earlier mistakes. Harry's testimony would be vital in determining their fates. Harry might argue that mercy and rehabilitation should be prioritized over revenge. Not for the worst offenders, not for those who tortured and murdered without remorse, but for those who were coerced or misled, who made terrible choices but ultimately tried to make amends. This would be controversial, with many arguing that all Death Eaters should be punished severely. But Harry's voice would carry enormous weight, and his plea for measured justice might influence the outcomes. The wizarding world's treatment of Slytherin House in the years following the war would improve dramatically thanks to Harry's example. Parents would be less afraid of their children being sorted into Slytherin. Students would feel less stigmatized by the green and silver. The house could reclaim its founding values, ambition and cunning and resourcefulness, without the association with dark magic and blood purity. Future generations of Slytherin students would grow up with Harry Potter as their example. Proof that you can be ambitious and cunning and still be a hero. They would learn about how Slytherins fought in the Battle of Hogwarts, how the house produced heroes alongside villains, how character is determined by choices rather than sorting. The house's reputation would never be fully cleansed. The historical association with dark wizards too strong, but it would improve significantly. Harry's legacy would be debated by historians and scholars for centuries. Some would argue that his Slytherin sorting was crucial to his success, that it gave him the tools he needed to defeat Voldemort. Others would claim he succeeded despite being in Slytherin, that his Gryffindor qualities of bravery and heroism were what truly mattered. The truth, as Harry would know, is that both perspectives are incomplete. Harry was successful because he embodied the best qualities of multiple houses, because he refused to be limited by labels and expectations. The books written about Harry's life would fill libraries. Some would be accurate, others wildly speculative, many somewhere in between. Harry would hate most of them, uncomfortable with being reduced to a character in a story, with having his pain and trauma packaged as entertainment. But he would understand the need for people to process what happened, to make sense of the war through narrative. He might even eventually write his own account, setting the record straight on what really happened. Harry's children, when they arrive years later, would grow up knowing their father was in Slytherin. This would shape their expectations and anxieties about their own sorting. James Sirius Potter might worry about living up to his father's legacy regardless of which house he joins. Albus Severus Potter, named for 2 Slytherins, might feel less afraid of being sorted there. Lily Luna Potter might not care about houses at all, having been raised to understand that character matters more than colors. The conversation Harry would have with Albus before his first year at Hogwarts would be different in this timeline. Instead of reassuring his son that it doesn't matter if he's in Slytherin, Harry would tell him about what Slytherin House gave him, about the friends he made there, about how being in Slytherin taught him to think strategically and understand power dynamics. He would also be honest about the challenges, the prejudice from others, the struggle to prove himself. But ultimately, Harry would tell Albus what he most needs to hear, that he will be loved and supported regardless of where the hat places him. The trials of captured Death Eaters would consume the wizarding world for months. Harry would testify repeatedly, his word carrying enormous weight in determining sentences. He would advocate for mercy where appropriate, for distinguishing between those who chose evil freely and those who were coerced or manipulated. But he would also insist on justice for true believers, for those who tortured and murdered without remorse. Finding the balance between revenge and justice would be one of the most difficult challenges of the post-war period. Draco Malfoy's trial would be particularly significant. If Draco fought alongside Harry, if he provided information about Death Eater operations, if he made amends for his earlier choices, Harry would testify passionately on his behalf. The courtroom would be packed, everyone wanting to see whether a Malfoy could be redeemed, whether Harry Potter would really defend someone from such a notorious Death Eater family. Harry's testimony would highlight Draco's youth, the impossible pressure from his family, the courage it took to choose differently. It wouldn't erase Draco's mistakes, but it might prevent him from spending his life in Azkaban. Narcissa Malfoy's trial would hinge on her lie to Voldemort in the forest. She saved Harry's life by telling Voldemort he was dead when she could feel his heartbeat. That single choice, born from love for her son, changed everything. Harry would testify to this, would argue that Narcissa deserves leniency for her crucial role in Voldemort's defeat. The prosecution would counter that she was a Death Eater supporter who enabled countless atrocities. The verdict would set precedent for how the wizarding world treats those who switched sides late in the war. Lucius Malfoy would be harder to defend. His crimes are extensive and well documented. He was a Death Eater in both wars, used his influence to spread dark magic and prejudice, participated in torture and murder. Harry might testify about mitigating circumstances, about how Lucius was terrified of Voldemort near the end, but even Harry would struggle to argue for full pardon. Lucius would likely face significant prison time, though perhaps not life in Azkaban given his family's eventual cooperation. The rebuilding of Slytherin House's reputation would be a generational project. The house produced heroes in the final battle, students who fought against Death Eaters despite family connections, who chose conscience over convenience. Their stories would need to be told loudly and repeatedly to counteract centuries of association with dark wizards. Harry would be the most visible symbol of Slytherin redemption, but he couldn't do it alone. Every Slytherin who fought, who resisted, who chose differently, would contribute to reshaping how the house is perceived. Hogwarts itself would need restructuring. The house system, which served to divide students and reinforce prejudices, would face serious questioning. Some would call for eliminating houses entirely, for creating a unified student body without artificial divisions. Others would argue for preserving houses but reducing their importance, making them dormitory assignments rather than identities. Harry would probably favor reform over elimination, believing that house diversity has value, but that the competition and antagonism need to be reduced. The curriculum would need updating too. Defense against the dark arts would finally have a stable teacher now that Voldemort is gone, and his curse on the position is broken. Muggle studies would need to be mandatory, with better curriculum that actually teaches students about Muggle culture and technology. History of magic would need to include more recent history, including the 2 wars against Voldemort and the role of blood purity ideology in driving conflict. And new classes might be added, covering topics like magical ethics, multicultural magic, and healing trauma. Snape's portrait would eventually appear in the headmaster's office despite the controversy. Many would argue that he doesn't deserve the honor, that his bullying of students and his years as a Death Eater disqualify him. But Harry would fight for Snape's portrait, would insist that his role as a spy and his protection of Harry earn him recognition. The portrait would be complicated and surly, vintage Snape, but it would be there as a reminder that people are more than their worst moments, that redemption is possible even for those who make terrible choices. Harry's career choices after the war would reflect his Slytherin training. He might still become an Auror, using his understanding of dark magic and criminal psychology to hunt down remaining dark wizards. But he might also go into politics, recognizing that real change happens through laws and institutions, not just individual heroism. As Minister of Magic or a high-ranking ministry official, Harry could reshape magical society, using his fame and influence to push through reforms that would have been impossible before. Or Harry might choose a quieter path. He's been famous his entire life, has been in danger constantly, has sacrificed more than anyone should have to sacrifice. Maybe after the war, Harry just wants peace. He might take up teaching at Hogwarts, passing on his knowledge to the next generation. He might travel the world, exploring magical communities and learning new magic. He might write books, documenting what really happened and correcting the myths that have grown around his life. Whatever he chooses, it would be his choice, free from prophecy and obligation for the first time in his life. Harry's romantic life would develop differently as a Slytherin. The relationship with Cho Chang, if it happened at all, would be complicated by house dynamics and the political implications of their pairing. Cho, grieving Cedric and dealing with her own trauma, might view Harry with suspicion or confusion rather than attraction. A Slytherin Harry might seem too calculating, too different from the straightforward Gryffindor hero she expected. Their brief relationship might be even more doomed than in the original timeline, ending quickly once they realize they don't really understand each other. Ginny Weasley presents a more complex scenario. In the original timeline, Ginny's crush on Harry eventually develops into genuine love between equals. But with Harry and Slytherin and Ginny and Gryffindor, with the Weasley family's historic distrust of Slytherins, the path to romance would be much rockier. Ginny would have to overcome her family's prejudices and her own preconceptions. Harry would have to prove himself worthy of her trust repeatedly. Their relationship, if it developed at all, would be forged in defiance of expectations, making it either stronger or ultimately impossible. There's a compelling possibility that Harry ends up with someone from Slytherin house entirely. A relationship with Daphne Greengrass, built on years of friendship and mutual respect, could develop naturally. They would understand each other's experiences in Slytherin, share inside jokes about house dynamics, have compatible approaches to problem solving. Daphne would appreciate Harry's famous status less than his character, his willingness to challenge Slytherin's worst traditions while respecting its better qualities. Their relationship would be marked by intellectual partnership and strategic thinking about how to build a life together. Or perhaps Harry ends up with someone completely unexpected, someone from another magical community or culture entirely. After the war, traveling and experiencing different magical traditions, Harry might meet someone who knows nothing of his fame, who sees him as just Harry rather than the boy who lived or the chosen one. Starting fresh with someone unconnected to his traumatic past might be exactly what Harry needs to heal and move forward. The relationship with the Weasley family would be complicated but not impossible in this timeline. Molly and Arthur Weasley are fundamentally good people who judge others by their character rather than their house. They might be initially wary of Harry being in Slytherin, but his actions would speak louder than his house colors. If Harry remained friends with Hermione, if he fought against Voldemort, if he proved himself trustworthy repeatedly, the Weasleys would eventually welcome him. It might take longer than in the original timeline, but their acceptance, once earned, would be genuine. Ron's relationship with Harry would remain the biggest casualty of the alternate sorting. Without the immediate bonding on the Hogwarts Express translating into house fellowship, Ron and Harry might never become close friends. They might remain friendly acquaintances, people who wave to each other in the corridors and make small talk when they run into each other, but not the brothers they became in the original timeline. This loss would ache in subtle ways, a friendship that should have been but never quite developed. However, there's a possibility that Ron and Harry become friends despite their house differences. It would require more effort, more intentional choice, more determination to cross house lines. But if they did become friends, if Ron proved willing to look past his family's prejudices and Harry proved himself worthy of trust, their friendship might be even more meaningful. It would be a friendship chosen deliberately rather than falling into it by proximity, a statement that house divisions don't have to define relationships. The twins, Fred and George Weasley, might actually appreciate Slytherin Harry more than expected. They value cleverness and rule-breaking, qualities that align well with Slytherin traits. If Harry proved himself funny and willing to participate in pranks, the twins might adopt him as an honorary Weasley regardless of his house. Their deaths, particularly Fred's death in the Battle of Hogwarts, would devastate Harry whether they were close friends or friendly acquaintances. The senselessness of it, the waste of potential, would reinforce Harry's determination to build a better world. Percy Weasley's arc would be fascinating in this timeline. Percy's ambition and rule-following actually align quite well with certain Slytherin values. If Harry were in Slytherin, Percy might view him more favorably, seeing a student who understands the importance of advancement and following proper procedures. When Percy breaks with his family over their support of Dumbledore and Harry, it would be even more complicated. He might struggle with the fact that Harry, a Slytherin who should understand ambition and pragmatism, is choosing the dangerous path of resistance. Percy's eventual reconciliation with his family and return during the final battle would be even more poignant. Bill and Charlie Weasley would probably be relatively neutral on Harry's house placement. Bill, working for Gringotts and having traveled extensively, would be above petty house prejudices. Charlie, focused on dragons in Romania, would care more about Harry's character than his house colors. When Bill marries Fleur and they host Harry at Shell Cottage, Bill's acceptance of Harry would be complete and unqualified, offering safety and shelter without judgment. Fleur Delacour's relationship with Harry would be interesting as a Slytherin. During the Triwizard Tournament, she might view Slytherin Harry with more respect, seeing cunning and ambition as admirable traits. French magical culture might have different attitudes toward the qualities valued by different houses, making Fleur less susceptible to British prejudices. Her part Vila nature would make her sensitive to genuine character beneath surface appearances, and she would recognize Harry's essential goodness, regardless of his house colors. Victor Crumb's friendship with Harry during fourth year would probably develop similarly, regardless of house. Crumb, an international celebrity in his own right, would recognize a kindred spirit in Harry, someone who understands the burden of fame. Their mutual respect would be based on character and shared experiences rather than house affiliation. Crumb's relationship with Hermione would create an interesting dynamic, with Harry potentially facilitating cross-school and cross-house romance. The various professors' relationships with Harry would shift in nuanced ways. Minerva McGonagall, while maintaining professional standards, might be slightly cooler toward Harry without the house connection. She would still recognize his talent and occasionally bend rules for him, but the special warmth she showed Gryffindor Harry might be absent. This would affect Harry more than he'd admit, longing for that maternal approval and finding it just slightly out of reach. Pomona Sprout would probably treat Harry neutrally, neither favoring nor disfavoring him based on house. Her Hufflepuff values of fairness and hard work would mean she judges Harry on his efforts in herbology, rather than his fame or house placement. Harry might actually appreciate this neutrality, this teacher who expects him to work hard and learn without any special treatment. Phileas Flitwick would delight in Harry's magical talent regardless of house. The Charms professor seems genuinely excited about clever magic and dedicated students from any house. He might even give Harry special attention, recognizing potential for advanced charm work and encouraging Harry to push his boundaries. Flitwick's duel with Antonin Dolohov during the Battle of Hogwarts would take on extra significance if he had been one of Harry's supportive professors throughout the years. Sybil Trelawney's prophecy would haunt Harry just as much in Slytherin as in Gryffindor. The knowledge that either he or Voldemort must die, that they cannot both live, would be a constant weight on Harry's shoulders. But Harry's Slytherin training might make him more strategic about the prophecy, more focused on finding ways to turn its vague wording to his advantage. The prophecy says one must die at the hand of the other, but it doesn't specify how or when or under what circumstances. A Slytherin might look for loopholes, for clever interpretations, for ways to fulfill the letter of the prophecy while subverting its spirit. Rubeus Hagrid's friendship with Harry would transcend house boundaries completely. Hagrid doesn't care about house divisions, judging people by their kindness and their treatment of magical creatures. Harry's Slytherin status wouldn't matter to Hagrid at all. Their friendship would develop identically to the original timeline, with Hagrid serving as a source of comfort, information, and occasional dangerous adventures. Hagrid's unwavering loyalty to Harry, even when public opinion turns against him, would be a constant in Harry's life, regardless of house colors. The relationship with magical creatures would be an interesting area for Slytherin Harry to explore. Parseltongue already connects Harry to snakes, and being in Slytherin House might encourage him to develop that connection further. He might study snake magic more deeply, learn to communicate with snakes on more sophisticated levels, understand their nature and needs. This wouldn't make Harry dark or evil. It would simply mean he's embracing a rare magical gift that happens to align with his house symbol. other magical creatures might react to Harry differently based on his house placement. Thestrals, visible only to those who have witnessed death, would still be drawn to Harry's grief and understanding. Hippogriffs like Buckbeak would respond to Harry's respect and careful approach regardless of house. Phoenixes, particularly Fawkes, would recognize Harry's essential goodness and loyalty. House placement might change how humans perceive Harry, but magical creatures would see deeper, would recognize his true nature beneath the surface labels. The Elder Wand's allegiance would follow the same path regardless of Harry's house. Wandlore doesn't care about human institutions like house divisions. The wand recognizes power, intent, and rightful mastery. When Harry disarms Draco at Malfoy Manor, the Elder Wand's allegiance transfers to Harry whether he's in Gryffindor or Slytherin. Voldemort's fundamental misunderstanding of how the wand works would doom him regardless of his opponent's house colors. Harry's approach to the Deathly Hallows quest might be more calculating as a Slytherin. He might spend more time considering whether to pursue the Hallows or the Horcruxes, weighing the strategic advantages of each path. Hermione would still argue for focusing on Horcruxes, pointing out that Dumbledore already tried the Hallows path and it didn't end well. But Slytherin Harry might be more tempted by the power the Hallows represent, more willing to consider whether mastering death might give him an advantage against Voldemort. Ultimately, Harry would still choose the Horcrux path because it's the more certain way to defeat Voldemort. The Hallows are legendary and their powers uncertain, while Horcruxes are concrete magical objects that can be found and destroyed. Slytherin values include cunning and strategy, and the strategic choice is to focus on the known threat rather than chase legends. But Harry might hold on to the Resurrection Stone and the Invisibility Cloak, recognizing their value even while not actively seeking the Elder Wand. The Invisibility Cloak's significance in Harry's life would remain unchanged. It's his father's cloak, a family heirloom, a tool that has saved his life repeatedly. Whether Harry is in Gryffindor or Slytherin, the cloak represents his connection to his parents and his ability to move unseen through dangerous situations. A Slytherin might actually appreciate the cloak even more, recognizing how perfectly it aligns with values of cunning and strategic advantage. Harry's Patronus. The stag that represents his father would be a powerful symbol of his identity. In Slytherin House, surrounded by students whose Patronuses might be snakes or other creatures associated with dark magic, Harry's stag would stand out. It would be a reminder that he chose differently, that his happiest memories are of family and love rather than power and domination. Teaching others to produce Patronuses, as he does in the DA, Harry would emphasize that the spell requires genuine happiness and positive emotion, something dark wizards struggle to achieve. The impact of Harry's fame would shift in interesting ways depending on house. Slytherins might be more comfortable with fame and status, viewing it as a resource to be leveraged rather than a burden to be endured. They might encourage Harry to use his celebrity for advantage, to make connections and build influence. Harry would resist this instrumentalization of his fame, insisting that he's not special, that he was just a baby when Voldemort attacked, that he doesn't deserve the attention. But he might learn to use his fame strategically when necessary, recognizing that sometimes celebrity can open doors that would otherwise remain closed. The end-of-year house point awards would be particularly dramatic in Harry's first year. If Slytherin was already winning and then Dumbledore awards last-minute points to Gryffindor, Slytherin students would feel cheated. But if Harry's actions in saving the Philosopher's Stone earned Slytherin enough points to secure victory, it would be a powerful statement about what the house values. The other houses might protest, but Slytherin would have legitimate claim to victory through Harry's heroism. The social events at Hogwarts beyond Quidditch and classes would shape house relationships. The various balls, dances, and celebrations would be opportunities for cross-house interaction. Harry's attendance at these events, who he brings as dates or companions, how he navigates the social dynamics, would all be watched carefully and interpreted politically. A simple decision about who to dance with could become a statement about house loyalties and social alliances. The prefect and head boy-girl systems would be interesting for Harry to navigate. If Harry became a Slytherin prefect, he would have authority over students from all houses, requiring him to set aside house loyalty in favor of school-wide fairness. This would be excellent training for his later role as a leader transcending house divisions. Ron as a Gryffindor prefect might create friendly rivalry or partnership between them, depending on how their relationship developed. Hermione as a Gryffindor prefect would almost certainly happen, and her working relationship with Harry would be professional and effective. The question of whether Harry would become head boy is interesting. In the original timeline, he doesn't pursue it, more focused on hunting Horcruxes than school administration. In the Slytherin timeline, the same priorities would apply. But if Harry had stayed at Hogwarts for a full 7th year, his selection as head boy would be controversial. Many would argue he deserves it based on his achievements and leadership. Others would claim favoritism, or that his fame shouldn't outweigh other students' merits. Whoever became head boy or girl would serve in Harry's shadow, their accomplishments overshadowed by his celebrity. The libraries and restricted sections would be resources Harry uses extensively in both timelines. His need to research dark magic, Horcruxes, and various magical theories would require access to restricted books. Slytherin Harry might be more comfortable with dark magic research, more willing to read forbidden texts without the squeamishness that might affect a Gryffindor. But he would still maintain ethical boundaries, reading about dark magic to understand and defend against it rather than to practice it. Madame Pince, the librarian, would treat Harry with the same stern protectiveness she shows all students who might damage her precious books. Harry's fame wouldn't matter to her. Only his treatment of library materials would earn her approval or disapproval. This neutrality would be refreshing for Harry. Another adult who sees him as just another student rather than the boy who lived. The library would remain a refuge for Harry throughout his years at Hogwarts, a place of knowledge and quiet contemplation. The Room of Requirement would be even more significant in this timeline. Serving as the DA meeting place, the room would witness Slytherins and Gryffindors training together, house divisions temporarily set aside. Harry would marvel at the room's ability to provide exactly what's needed, whether that's training dummies, reference books, or simply space to think. The room might even provide different amenities for Slytherin Harry than it did for Gryffindor Harry, reflecting his different needs and preferences shaped by years in the dungeons. And Harry, older and hopefully wiser, would look back on his sorting and recognize it as a gift. Not because Slytherin was inherently better than Gryffindor would have been, but because it challenged him, forced him to confront prejudice from within, gave him opportunities to change minds and hearts in ways he couldn't have from outside the house. His path was harder in some ways, easier in others, but ultimately it was his path, shaped by his choices and his determination to do what was right. So what if Harry Potter had been sorted into Slytherin? The answer is complex and multifaceted. Harry would still be Harry, fundamentally good and brave and willing to sacrifice himself for others. But he would be shaped by different experiences, different friendships, different challenges. He would prove that Slytherin doesn't equal evil, that ambition can serve the light, that the qualities valued by Salazar Slytherin can build rather than destroy. He would bridge divides, challenge prejudices, and ultimately save the wizarding world, not despite being in Slytherin, but in part because of it. His legacy would reshape what it means to be a Slytherin, giving future generations of students in green and silver a hero to look up to, proof that greatness comes in many forms and from all houses. And in the end, isn't that what the Sorting Hat always hoped for? Not division, but diversity. Not rivalry, but recognition that all qualities have value. Not four houses working against each other, but four houses working together to create something greater than any could achieve alone. Harry Potter and Slytherin would be the embodiment of that ideal, the living proof that unity and understanding can triumph over division and hate. His story would inspire countless others to look beyond superficial labels, to judge people by their choices and character rather than their house colors or blood status, to believe that change is possible even within the most entrenched systems. And that legacy, perhaps more than defeating Voldemort, would be Harry's greatest contribution to the wizarding world.